Welcome to Organized Chaos, the podcast dedicated to helping seven-figure companies grow to nine-figure ones by turning HR into rocket fuel for their growth. I'm your host, Nahat Kirwala, and I've been helping companies do just that for more than a decade. In each episode, I'll dive into HR topics that have a significant impact on your company's growth and leave you with actionable advice that will help your business reach its full potential. Let's dive right in and start organizing all that HR chaos. Hello and welcome to episode 3. Today, I want to talk about the 5 HR capabilities that every scaling company needs. Then, I'll recommend actionable steps that you can take to start developing these capabilities within your organization. So let's jump right in. Capability number 1, hiring talent. So, growing companies, especially startups, need every employee to be a great fit in their role. You're going to face a lot of ups and downs as you scale, and having an A team will help you weather all the storms you will face. If you're a startup founder who is early on in the journey, you're able to leverage your network and hire strong talent, but you can't do that forever, especially when your company's growth picks up steam. An early 2024 study published by Aaron, the employee referral platform, shows that the percentage of hires made from employee referrals ranges between 9 and 17%, depending on the size of your company. So you're going to need alternative sources to hire more, but also a rigorous evaluation process to pick the right people for your company. As the company grows, it is also impossible to expect every new hire to be a game changer. But early on, you need each one of your hires to be a home run. To do hiring right, every person on your team who is involved in the hiring process must be aligned on the job requirements and candidate profile. You should all agree on the criteria to use to evaluate candidates, the interview process, and clearly articulate the role of each interviewer in the process. This requires a lot of preparation if you hope to make the right hires. Otherwise, your entire hiring approach is nothing but a crapshoot. Each interviewer ends up using their own subjective version of the job requirements. It's like asking a group of friends to give you restaurant recommendations without giving them any context as to what you're interested in. Each one of your friends will make recommendations based on what they believe you will like, but without knowing for sure what that is unless they explicitly ask. Now, if you tell your friends that you're looking for restaurant recommendations suitable for a first date, then that's a completely different story. Now you've given them a starting point, but it's not enough. You need to explain what makes a restaurant suitable for a first date in your eyes. Do you want something fancy or casual? What kind of cuisine are you interested in? How about the budget? And so on. You get the picture. Coming back to hiring, you should always do this preparatory work before you start hiring for the job. I can't count the number of times I've had leaders tell very different stories about their expectations for a job and describe wildly different ideal candidate profiles. It sounds like they're talking about different jobs, and go figure what kind of hiring that will result in. Here are the action items I recommend you take in order to strengthen your hiring capability. Number 1, start by writing down why you need this job at your company. If the job already exists and you're adding more capacity, write down why you believe it's time to hire this additional person. Be very specific. I recommend asking yourself the following questions. What am I trying to solve for this hire? What is the impact of not filling this role? If you can't come up with clear and convincing answers to these questions, then reevaluate whether you need to make that hire in the first place. Number 2, build a job profile that clearly defines the behaviors, skills, and culture fit requirements for the job. Circulate this job profile with every person involved in the hiring process or who will work closely with this role to ensure alignment. Do not post the job online or start interviewing candidates before there is a clear alignment between everyone involved. Not only that, but you need to make sure that all the participants are sticking to this criteria when they're evaluating candidates. The best way to track this is by using interview scorecards, summaries, or check-ins with the team to discuss candidates in the hiring pipeline. Number 3, always evaluate your recruitment process and make sure that each step in the process has a unique purpose and brings you closer to making a decision. Let me elaborate on this point. How many times have you been through an interview process where several of the interviews sounded the same, where you were asked similar, if not the same questions, and you ended up asking yourself, what was the point of that interview? That is a clear sign of a bad hiring process that isn't well thought out. You avoid this problem by eliminating interview steps that add no value to the decision-making process. So before you add another stage to your process or another interviewer, determine the intended outcome from this additional step. Is the additional step necessary, or can you get the same information from other stages in the process? Similarly, do not add interviewers to the process before determining the value that individual will bring to the evaluation process. Every interviewer should have a clear role, such as evaluating technical skills, culture fit, industry experience, and so on. Number 4, prepare interview questions and scorecards that will help you evaluate candidates fairly based on the criteria you and your team set at the start of the process. Make sure your interviews are consistent and don't wing it with your questioning. The worst thing you can do is walk into an interview with no preparation and just ask whatever comes to mind based on the candidate's resume. You need a list of questions that you will ask every candidate to ensure you are comparing apples to apples. Feel free to probe and go off script when needed, but don't make that your standard way of interviewing. Haphazard interviewing leads to haphazard hiring. And number 5, evaluate candidates based on how well they fit the job, not how they stack up to other candidates or employees at your company. When you do that, you lose sight of the job itself and focus on the characteristics of individual employees that stretch beyond the job you're hiring for. For example, you might have had an HR director who was very good with Python programming and could create excellent data analysis reports, but the job itself doesn't require that skill because your HR systems can do that easily. So comparing candidates to that departed employee skews the evaluation process and scrutinizes candidates against skills that are not necessary for performing the job well. Now let's talk about capability number 2, onboarding with purpose. 88% of today's workforce believe that they haven't been provided with a comprehensive onboarding program. This currently leads to nearly 38% of employees leaving their jobs within the first year. Over 40% of these resignations occur within the first 90 days. When you're growing your company, the last thing you want is to deal with a revolving door of talent that you spend so much time and effort to hire. To prevent this, it's crucial to allocate enough time and resources to creating an effective onboarding program that can facilitate smooth transitions for new hires. Asking employees to hit the ground running or sink or swim is not an effective way to decrease their time to productivity. This approach does the exact opposite. There are several things you can do to provide a better onboarding experience. Number 1, make sure you have everything ready for the employee's first day. Examples include software accounts, access to shared drives, a company laptop, and anything else that this employee needs to do their job. Number 2, get all the HR paperwork out of the way no later than day 1. This includes things like employment verifications, policies, employment contracts, and so forth. Most modern HR systems allow you to create onboarding tasks that new joiners can start tackling before their start date. So leverage technology to improve the onboarding experience and make it more efficient for your team. Number 3, ensure that your hiring managers have prepared onboarding plans to provide their new joiners with the information, resources, introductions, and training they need to get started. At the very least, ask your managers to have 30-day onboarding plans if 60 or 90 days aren't practical for your company right now. An onboarding plan should include a checklist of things the new joiner should go through or complete. For example, new joiners might need to attend an orientation session and complete a training program. The onboarding plan should also mention clear goals for the onboarding period and explain the available support system to help the new joiner. For example, you might need the new joiner to deliver an analysis report to you by day 90, and you let them know who they need to connect with to get the information they need, and when and how they can request assistance from you and their teammates. Number 4, it's very important that new joiners understand what is expected of them during the onboarding period and beyond. You and your hiring managers need to be clear on the expectations and clearly define how you will evaluate progress. Here are some good questions to ask. What does success look like for this job during the first 90 days, 6 months, 1 year, and beyond? How will I objectively measure success? I always recommend that you put this information in writing. This will guarantee clarity and transparency between you and your employees. Number 5, create a contact list that new joiners can refer to. Organize that contact list in a way that makes sense for your business and explain what each contact does and how that person is relevant to the new joiner's role. For example, Person A is the IT support specialist and can troubleshoot all software and hardware issues. Giving new joiners this information will put them at ease because you're providing them with a clear support system from day one. Number 6, ask all your people managers to have regular check-ins with new joiners. This will allow them to keep a pulse on the new joiner's experience and be proactive in case any action is needed. Finally, for onboarding, hold your managers accountable for delivering a consistent onboarding experience, but make sure they have the capacity and resources to do so. It's unfair to expect your managers to deliver a solid onboarding experience if you don't give them the time to do that. Now let's talk about capability number 3, managing company culture. Culture is the cornerstone of any company. Without the right culture, your company will never reach its full potential, even with the best products and talent. I like to define culture as how we do things around here. As a leader, you should invest in and focus on culture because if you don't deliberately define it, then it will be defined for you. That usually doesn't go very well. Culture is probably the most difficult thing to define, implement, and maintain over time. It requires clearly defined values, consistency in implementation, and just plain old effort and perseverance. More importantly, it requires alignment across the leadership team and buy-in from employees if you ever hope of having a uniform culture across the entire company. I will talk about culture in future episodes because it is such a vast topic, but for now, I will leave you with some do's and don'ts when it comes to building a strong company culture. Identify 3 to 5 values or culture pillars for your company and give practical examples of on-the-job behaviors that align with each one. Do this very early in your company's life, even if it's only you and a few others. This is simply about defining the types of behaviors that are acceptable and unacceptable in your company. Document your culture pillars and always communicate them to the team. Create resources that explain these pillars and provide examples from day-to-day scenarios that employees are likely to face on the job. For example, if one of your pillars is related to empowerment, You explain what empowerment means for your company. It could be that you empower employees to decide how work should be done as long as they achieve the intended results. In this scenario, you can give an example of an employee agreeing to goals with their manager and having the full autonomy to determine how they achieve those goals. Recognize employees who live the company culture. Reward and celebrate them to solidify the importance of culture to your company. There are many ways to do this. For example, culturally aligned behaviors can be a core part of your performance reviews, or you could give out spot bonuses for employees who exhibit behaviors that align with the company culture. In short, make it clear that you value employees who embody the company's culture. Doing this will encourage employees to double down on the culture you've defined and will slowly weed out those who are not a good fit for your organization. Hold managers accountable for living the culture and instilling it into their teams. Make it clear that managers are responsible for upholding the company's culture. Managers who march to the beat of their own drum at the expense of the company culture should be stripped of their managerial duties or removed from your organization. Also, keep in mind that culture is not only HR's responsibility. HR is an enabler of company culture, but the responsibility ultimately falls on the shoulders of people managers across the organization. Never make decisions that do not align with your company's culture. Communicate your decision-making process to employees and articulate how decisions align or don't align to your cultural values. Your team will start modeling this behavior and ultimately improve decision-making altogether. This makes life easier for all decision makers and provides a framework for how you and your team can evaluate decisions. Employees will also understand how and why you make decisions, which will lead to higher levels of engagement. Lastly, fire anyone who does not wish to work within the parameters of your company's culture. You cannot let a few bad apples impact the entire company. It doesn't matter who they are and how long they've been at the company. Letting toxic employees stay sends the wrong message and will push good employees to leave. So let's talk about capability number 4. That is building scalable HR operations. A scaling company without the appropriate HR infrastructure won't be able to grow at the pace it needs to. For me, HR operations include all the day-to-day HR activities that are essential for the company to run. Think onboarding and offboarding, payroll, HR policy management, compliance, and so forth. Building a scalable HR operation is not simply about adding HR technology and hoping things work out, move faster, and cost less over time. The first step in building a scalable HR operation is to clearly define processes based on the desired outcomes. For example, are you designing your HR operations for speed, cost efficiency, or quality of experience? One of the biggest mistakes I see startups make is that they allow HR software to dictate how their processes work instead of the other way around. You need to build processes that work for your company and deploy HR software that will help you implement those processes. You should never adopt a process because that is the only way your HR software does it. Always think of how you can automate redundant tasks and processes with technology before you consider throwing people at the problem. AI and automation are your best friends when you're growing quickly, so leverage technology to keep your HR operation nimble. Here are some steps you can take to make sure your HR operations are more efficient and scalable. First thing you can do is map out all of your company's existing HR processes. Be detailed and understand each step in every process. Then, evaluate each HR process and identify the strong areas as well as the potential improvements. Specify what an ideal outcome looks like and redesign accordingly. Focus on automation to alleviate your team of redundant administrative HR work. Adding more people is rarely the solution because you'll run into the same capacity problems as you continue to grow if you're not thinking of HR processes with automation and efficiency in mind. Finally, source HR technology that can deliver the HR processes the way you want them. If you already have HR tech, then determine if your existing tech stack can adapt to your new processes. Always opt for HR tools that can integrate with the rest of your HR and enterprise tech stacks. If you'd like access to the template that I use to evaluate HR tech, check the show notes for a link to download this for free. Now, the final capability. Capability number 5, workforce planning and org design. Now, I understand that workforce planning and org design are two separate things, but I think they are interconnected. And let me explain. When you're a growing company, you're constantly adding new jobs that didn't exist in your company before that point in time. Adding new job roles is a function of your company needing new capabilities. When you introduce new capabilities into your company, you automatically trigger org design questions to help you determine where that new role sits in the company. Companies that are growing quickly cannot afford to separate workforce planning and organizational design. The faster your pace of growth, the more likely you are to overhire or create a Frankenstein of an org structure if you separate these two. Scaling an organization is not just about adding headcount quickly. It is about strategically planning the workforce, designing an effective organizational structure, and aligning it with your company goals. Without careful workforce planning, you run the risk of creating bloated structures that can compromise efficiency and your company's long-term sustainability. There are so many nuances on how to do this properly, and I'm dedicating future episodes to this topic. For now, here are some starting tips on how to plan your workforce and design your org structure. List the capabilities your company needs to achieve its strategic objectives and identify where you have gaps. For example, let's assume that you run a SaaS company that wants to leverage AI in the platform and expand your market presence in French-speaking countries. To do this, you need capabilities such as business development, marketing localization, language translation, machine learning, and data analysis. After the first step, work with your team to decide how these capabilities will be organized and why. This exercise will help you determine which roles are new and which ones are capacity additions to existing roles. Use your output from this discussion to start mapping out the organization structure and reporting lines. Don't go down the job title rabbit hole. In other words, it doesn't matter if you need a VP or director of business development. What's important is that your company needs to execute business development proficiently to meet its strategic objectives. Finally, once you're clear on the capabilities and where they should sit in your organization, you'll have a draft workforce plan and org design. Work with your team to finalize the number of positions you need to fill and their reporting structure. Then, start detailing what each job role will do and fine-tune the duties and responsibilities. Those details will help you identify the combination of skills and experience you need to fill the roles in question. Well, that's all I have for this episode. In the next episode, I'll talk about how to scale your business the right way and deep dive into the do's and don'ts of scaling. I'll also share some stories from companies I've worked with and give you some actionable tips that you can implement quickly. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review wherever you get your podcasts. This will help me spread the word about organized chaos and keep the show going. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to suggest for the show, please send me an email to hello@organizedchaos.fyi. For more content and resources, make sure to check out the website at organizedchaos.fyi. See you on the next one.